Some Persian units even penetrated the Macedonian camp. Alexander had to decide whether to pursue Darius or stabilize his own lines. He chose to support. The year was 331 BC. The Persian Empire was still the largest political power on earth. Its territories stretched from the shores of the Mediterranean to the borders of India. It commanded immense wealth, vast manpower, and centuries of administrative experience. At its head stood King Darius III, ruler of the Achaemenid dynasty. Yet, in the west, a young Macedonian king was dismantling that empire piece by piece. His name was Alexander. By the time the two armies approached the plains near the village of Gaugamela in northern Mesopotamia, this was not their first encounter. 2 years earlier, Alexander had defeated Darius at the Battle of Issus. Despite being outnumbered there, Alexander's aggressive tactics shattered the Persian line. Darius fled the battlefield, leaving behind his royal family. This humiliation weighed heavily on him. Gaugamela would be his opportunity for redemption. After Issus, Alexander did not immediately pursue Darius deep into Asia. Instead, he secured the eastern Mediterranean coast. He captured Tyre after a brutal siege that demonstrated both his patience and ruthlessness. He took Gaza. Then he marched into Egypt, where he was welcomed as a liberator from Persian rule. There, he founded Alexandria, a city that would become one of the greatest centers of knowledge in the ancient world. But Alexander's ambitions extended beyond regional dominance. He wanted total conquest. Meanwhile, Darius was rebuilding. He gathered forces from every corner of his empire. Persian cavalry from the Iranian plateau, Median warriors, Bactrian, horsemen, Scythian allies, dot archers from Mesopotamia, even war elephants from India. He carefully selected a battlefield that would maximize his advantages. He ordered the terrain flattened and cleared of obstacles to ensure his chariots could operate effectively. He would not allow geography to limit him as it had at Issus. Alexander crossed the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. Moving steadily eastward, scouts reported massive Persian troop movements. The tension increased. The Macedonian army had marched thousands of miles, yet morale remained strong. They had not lost a major battle under Alexander's command. But the scale of what awaited them at Gaugamela was unprecedented. On the eve of battle, Darius positioned his forces in a wide formation designed to envelop the Macedonian army. His numbers were significantly larger. Ancient sources exaggerate them into the hundreds of thousands. Modern scholarship suggests perhaps 80,000 to 100,000, still far more than Alexander's roughly 40,000 to 50,000 troops. The imbalance was undeniable. That night, Alexander's generals proposed a surprise attack under cover of darkness. They believed a night assault would reduce the Persian numerical advantage. Alexander refused. He wanted a decisive, visible victory. He believed morale and symbolism mattered. He reportedly declared that he would not steal his victory. This decision reflected not arrogance but confidence. He trusted his training, discipline, and strategy. At dawn, both armies assembled. The Persian line stretched far across the plain. In the center stood Darius, elevated in his royal chariot, surrounded by elite guards. To either side were layers of cavalry and infantry. Scythed chariots were placed forward, ready to charge at high speed and disrupt Macedonian formations. Alexander organized his army with precision. On the right wing, he personally commanded the companion cavalry, the elite mounted shock troops who had followed him since his youth. On the left, General Parmenion commanded the Thessalian cavalry. At the center stood the Macedonian phalanx, a disciplined block of infantry armed with long sabres, forming a dense and intimidating wall of spear points. Additional troops were placed in reserve behind the main line to prevent encirclement. Alexander anticipated Persian attempts to flank him. When the battle began, Alexander advanced at an angle rather than directly forward. This diagonal movement confused Persian expectations. Darius responded by extending his line to avoid being outflanked, but in doing so, he created subtle gaps between his units. This was precisely what Alexander intended. The Persian scythed chariots charged. Their blades were designed to slice through tightly packed infantry, but the Macedonian soldiers calmly opened corridors in their ranks. Javelin throwers targeted the horses and drivers. Many chariots were neutralized before impact. The feared weapon proved less effective against disciplined troops. Meanwhile, Persian cavalry pressed hard against the Macedonian left wing. Pressure mounted. Parmenian's forces struggled under repeated assaults. At moments, it seemed the Macedonian line might collapse. Dust clouds reduced visibility. Shouts and the clash of metal filled the air. Alexander remained focused. He continued moving right, stretching the Persian formation further. Then he saw a gap opening in the Persian center. This was the decisive moment. He formed his companion cavalry into a wedge formation, concentrating force at a single point. The wedge accelerated toward the weakened section of Darius's line. The impact was devastating. Macedonian cavalry broke through and drove toward the Persian king. Darius faced a critical psychological test. As Alexander advanced rapidly toward him, panic spread among the Persian ranks. The sight of the Macedonian king charging directly at the royal chariot created chaos. Fearing capture or death, Darius turned and fled. His departure triggered a collapse in morale. Units began retreating. The cohesion of the massive Persian army dissolved. However, victory was not immediate. On the Macedonian left, Parmenian continued to face severe pressure. Some Persian units even penetrated the Macedonian camp. Alexander had to decide whether to pursue Darius or stabilize his own lines. He chose to support Parmenion. This decision demonstrated his understanding that total victory required preservation of his army. Once reinforced, the Macedonian left regained stability. Persian resistance crumbled. By the end of the day, the battlefield belonged to Alexander. Casualties on the Persian side were heavy. Macedonian losses were comparatively light. Darius fled eastward, attempting to regroup, but his authority was shattered in the months that followed. Key Persian cities surrendered. Babylon opened its gates. Susa submitted. Persepolis eventually fell, symbolizing the end of Achaemenid supremacy. Gaugamela marked more than the fall of a king. It signaled the transformation of the ancient world. Alexander adopted elements of Persian administration. He incorporated Persian nobles into his governance. He encouraged cultural blending, laying foundations for the Hellenistic era. Greek language and culture spread across Asia, influencing architecture, science, and philosophy. Militarily, Gaugamela demonstrated the effectiveness of maneuver warfare and combined arms tactics. Alexander integrated infantry, cavalry, light troops, and reserves in a flexible system. His ability to read battlefield dynamics and exploit openings set a new standard in military leadership. His opponents often relied on mass and tradition. He relied on adaptability and speed. The psychological dimension of the battle was equally significant. Darius's flight symbolized imperial collapse. Morale often determines outcomes in warfare. The moment the Persian king retreated, the battle's direction shifted irreversibly. In the years after Gaugamela, Alexander pressed further east. He campaigned in Bactria and Sogdiana. He crossed into India. He never lost a major battle. Yet his empire would not long survive him. After his death in 323 BC, his generals divided the territories among themselves. But the cultural fusion initiated by his conquests endured for centuries. The plains of Gaugamela were silent after the armies departed, but history had changed permanently. On that field, a young Macedonian king dismantled the greatest empire of his time, not merely through strength, but through strategy, discipline, and decisive leadership. Two rulers faced each other in 331 BC. One commanded the resources of a vast empire. The other commanded loyalty and tactical brilliance by sunset. Only one remained master of the known world, and from that moment forward, the name Alexander would carry a title history rarely grants the great. Support the channel by liking this video and subscribing for more high-quality historical documentaries.